Hello and welcome. My name is Eddie Jennings from EJSLLC.com, and this is a follow-up to a video that I did about whether or not you can install Active Directory domain services on Windows Server without the GUI, and why you should install Active Directory domain services on a Windows Server without the GUI. In this video, we're going to go into the how of that. And I'll take you from the very beginning all the way to joining a workstation to the domain on that workstation using PowerShell. So here we go. I have two VMs running. One's going to be our test domain controller. The other is going to be our test PC. And here we go. So when you first power on your Windows Server that has no GUI, you're going to see this press Control-Alt-Delete to unlock. So we'll do that. And we'll feed it our administrator credential for right now. And this is going to launch into the command prompt. And I'm going to alter this just a little bit, make it a little bit easier to read. Oh, not find. I want to go to properties, change the font here. Should make it a little bit easier to read on the video. So all the stuff that we're going to be doing is actually going to be in PowerShell rather than command. So once you log in and you see just the command prompt, you can type PowerShell. That'll take a few seconds or so, and this will launch PowerShell. There's a lot of stuff in the background that exists for PowerShell to do what it does, so that's why it's not necessarily instantaneous. So here we are in PowerShell. Now the only configuration I've done to this server, I've given it a new name, test DC, rather than just a little default win dash whatever that's used when you install Windows Server. And I have also done network configuration. I've just given it an IP address, and for DNS server I've set DNS to the loopback address 127.0.0.1 because this is going to be its own DNS server, and this is on a private network. If you've watched my videos in the past about being able to make a private network in Hyper-V, this is the foo network that I created on past videos. So for installing Active Directory domain services, think back to what this would look like in the GUI, and that's going to give you an idea of what commandlets you might need to use to be able to make this happen if you're completely new to using PowerShell and are not quite sure where to start. So in the GUI, what we did was add a Windows, actually we added a role, but it would be under the server manager and add roles and features. So we're going to be adding a feature to this server. And to figure out the name of the feature, what we're going to do is get feature, or get Windows feature. And we're going to use its display name. Should be able to tab complete that. Nope. All right, we can just use this name. We're going to search AD. Now, I already know what the name of the feature is, but just to show you how you would use the get Windows feature, if I search for AD, you're going to see all of the features that have the name AD in them. We have the certificate services and federation services, all that good stuff. But what we're going to be using is AD domain services. So to install this Windows feature, we're going to use a commandlet called add Windows feature. And the name is going to be AD domain services. Now there's some other parameters that we could feed with that if we needed, but for installing this on server without a GUI, we don't need to also install the management tools, because in this setup you would not actually be on the server itself doing management with group policy and AD users and computers. You would be doing that either from your jump box or from your workstation where you've had the remote server administrator tools installed. So this will take just a bit. It'll start the installation, and I'm going to pause the video for a moment so that way you're not just sitting through the progress bar, and we'll come back once we have some more items to do. So at this point, installation has finished. You'll notice it says it was successful. It also says that there is no restart needed, and feature result this shows you everything that was installed with this. If you remember from the GUI, when you would install a role, sometimes there were other features that would come with that role by default, and those would also have been installed when you installed Active Directory domain services through PowerShell. So the next step, you might be wondering, all right, so what do we do now? If you remember from the GUI, when you would promote this machine to be a domain controller, you were asked whether or not you wanted to add this domain controller to an existing domain, or if you wanted to make a new forest. Well, for this, we're going to be making a new forest. So I'm going to show you a commandlet that I often use if I have an idea of what I need to do in PowerShell, but I'm not 100% sure of the name. And that commandlet is called get command. So let me get this back in focus here. There we go. Command. And we're going to see if there is a command that has forest in it. And lo and behold, there is. You would think maybe add AD forest or new AD forest, but in fact the commandlet that you will use to create the new AD forest is called install ADDS forest. So install Active Directory Domain Services forest. Now, if you're not familiar with PowerShell, you can always do get help on any commandlet. You can use some tab completion there. And that will show you the syntax for the commandlet, what parameters it takes, and gives you an idea of what type of value the parameter will take, such as we would specify a domain name and it would be a string. It would just be a text string of what we want the domain to be. The nice thing about install ADDS forest, it's a little special in the fact that even if you don't know what the particular parameters are, just running the commandlet will actually walk you through the bare minimum that you need to be able to create your domain. So for this, in this example, we're going to do that. So I'm going to run the install ADDS forest, use tab completion there, press enter, and the first thing it's going to ask me is for my domain name. I'm going to use foo.com for this. I don't own foo.com, but this network is not connected to the internet in any way, so we're not going to have any kind of DNS conflicts and such. It will ask for the safe mode administrator password, which if you remember from installing a new forest in the GUI, you have to do this as well. Put in the password for that. It'll ask you to confirm it. And then it's going to say that this will be restarted when the operation is complete, and we want to say yes for that. Now at this point, it's going to go through all the same validation checks that would happen before with installing a domain controller. It's going to warn you about DNS delegation and such, but when it's all done, you will have a functioning domain controller. One other thing that you'll notice at the end, it'll give you the result, and it's going to say that no restart is needed, a restart is needed, and is going to happen. So once again, I'm going to pause the video so you're not just watching progress bars and such go by, and we'll pick back up when there's more tasks, or when there are more tasks to do. All right, at this point, the restart is over, so we're back to our server. We're going to click Control-Alt-Delete to be able to log in. And if you see, the enter credentials is now asking for foo administrator, rather than it just being the local administrator account, which it's still the local administrator, but you see. All right, so now we have the command.exe again. And so to continue work, we're going to go back into PowerShell. Just like before, it's going to take a few seconds to load up PowerShell. And so now, if you remember, we use the add feature to add the AD feature. We're now going to do get feature again. You don't have to do this. Oh, get Windows feature, I mean. It will let me, there we go. Windows feature, name, AD. And now, once it collects data, it's going a little slow because it's just been restarted, so there's still background processes and such running. Not nearly as many background processes as if you had a GUI, but still some. And if you see with Active Directory Domain Services, there's now an X in the box, meaning that particular role, which even though it's called a feature here, PowerShell calls everything a feature, but the role of Active Directory Domain Services is now installed. So at this point, we now have a fully functioning AD domain controller. So what we're going to do now is create an organizational unit, even though you technically don't need one if you're just doing a quick little lab on can you install AD, but in reality, you're going to be making some OUs. So the way that we do this, the command we're going to use is called add AD organizational unit. And again, you could use the get-command commandlet if you have an idea, hey, this is going to be organization, maybe get command org, and you would eventually find it. But add AD organizational unit is going to be the commandlet. Should, well, or so I thought. Maybe I'm wrong. Let's check. Get commandlet or get command. I'm wrong. It is new AD organization unit, and knew it sounded kind of odd saying add, but anyway, so new AD organization unit. I'm going to do get help with that, just to show you a couple of parameters that you're going to need for this. And there's all sorts of things you can add to it, but the ones that I'm going to focus on is the name of the OU and its path. Now, both of these take a string. However, there are particular strings that are needed for path. And so we're going to make our new organizational unit. Name, we're going to call this workstations. And the path is going to be its distinguished name. So if you're familiar with the distinguished name format with LDAP, that's going to, if you start from the far left, that's as far down into the tree of things you have, and then it ends with the domain components. So for this, this organization unit is going to be right under the top of the domain. So the distinguished name is going to be domain component foo, domain component com, since that com is our top level domain. And so what we would see if we had the GUI, the Active Directory users and computers, you would see this OU workstations appearing underneath the top level of foo.com domain. So the other thing that we need to do is create a user. So if you were to do get command user, you're going to find all sorts of commandlets with users, and you'll see one here that looks like it's probably something we need to use, and that is new AD user. Now, if I were to do get help with new AD user, there are a ton. Let me scroll up here. There are a ton of parameters with this. Not all of them you need, but if you think about it, when you go into the AD users and computers console, you will, and you look at the properties of a user, there are all sorts of properties that you can store in the directory about a user. But we're going to be doing just the basics here to be able to get a new user going. So we'll do new AD user. The name of that user, we're going to call it just test user. I'm going to give it display name test user. We're going to go ahead and give it a user principal name as well. Now it'll go ahead and create the SAM account name, which is what we usually think of as just an AD account name, but it will not create a user principal name by default. So we're going to create that here. Test, do quotes, test user at foo.com. We are going to enable the user. We are also going to create its password. And I'm going to do read host as secure string. And the reason for this, if you were to go back up to the parameters and you find the account password, what you're going to see is that it says it needs a secure string. This is not just good old type in your text. This is a special thing for PowerShell. And so what read host is going to do, once we're finished with the new AD user command, read host is going to accept input from the console, and the as secure string parameter is going to take the string that we type into the console and turn it into this format that the new AD user commandlet needs. And then lastly, we have change password at logon. We're going to set that to false. So if I press enter, the console moves down one line because it's now doing the read host piece of it, and I'm going to type in the password that I want to use. Notice that that's coming up as stars on the screen, and the user's been created. We can use getAdUser to verify this. Identity is the parameter that's going to accept. It'll accept the SAM account name, should accept user principal name, as well as if you do the whole distinguished name, it will accept that as well. So test user, and we find that there is our test user. I did not set the first and last name for it. We didn't need this for that. The user is enabled, and so now we have an OU at the top level of the domain called workstations, and we've created a user, and it was by default put into the user's container. So at this point, from the server perspective, we're done. We've made our domain, we've made an OU that we're going to put some computer accounts into, and we've made a user. So we're going to go over to the workstation. I have my Windows 10 workstation here. Right now I have just a local user account. Log in as the local user. It shouldn't take too long. It'll take a little longer than what we had on the Windows Server, but I decided to go ahead and give this VM 4 gigabytes of RAM instead of the normal 2 that I use. Just hopefully it'll allow this to speed along a little bit more. At least Windows is nice and polite, so it's welcome instead of just, please wait or something like that. And here we go. So you can still use the GUI to domain join this. However, we're going to be using PowerShell. And in order to do this, we need to run PowerShell as an administrator. I'll change the font here to make it a little bit easier for you to read on the video. All right, and once PowerShell comes up, first make sure that you rename your computer. I'm going to show you the host name I use because remember, a fresh install of Windows is going to have win dash a random string of characters. And for this, I wanted the computer to appear as test PC. So the commandlet we're going to use is called add computer. And the parameters that we'll use for it, there are a few that you can include with this. I'm going to show you just some of the basic stuff. We have to give it domain credentials. I'm going to use get credential for that, even though you don't have to do the get credential there. If you leave out domain credential, once you run the commandlet, it's going to ask you for a domain credential to be able to join the machine to the domain. It needs a domain name, and that's going to be foo.com, which is what we created on our server. And at this point, this is all you need, because once you authenticate and you've given it the domain name, it will create the computer object in the computer's container. However, since we went ahead and made an OU, we're going to specify that rather than put this new AD computer into the default container, put it into this OU. And you'll find this useful in your actual production environment because you probably have different OUs for different machines. So you can go ahead and specify that here. And to do that, we use OU path. And the name of that OU was workstations. And this is the distinguished name, just like we did when we created the OU. So domain component foo and domain component com. Now there's one other parameter we're going to add, and this just saves us a step. We're going to add restart. So that way when this runs, we're going to have a pop-up where we enter the credential for whatever domain administrator account that we use to say it's okay to join this computer to the domain, and then it'll just restart automatically. So press enter, and there's our pop-up. I'm going to put in the administrator password because I haven't created another domain administrator yet. And computer test PC has failed to join the domain because it can't find what you need. All right, well, some little troubleshooting here. I don't think I have configured networking on this yet, but we'll find out real quick. IP config, yep, I have not configured networking. So we're going to solve that real quick. First of all, I'm going to make sure I'm connected to the switch that I want, and I want foo switch. And a little bonus here, we're going to do some quick network configuration. So to do this, get net adapter will tell us information that we need for the commandlets to be able to configure the NIC on this VM. By the way, this is what you would do on your server as well. So I'm treating this as if, even though yes, I have a GUI, treating it like I don't. So we're going to do new net IP address. The if index is the same as interface index. I like to use that versus the alias. Interface index 4. The IP address, we're going to use 192.168.1. We'll do 50. And the prefix is going to be 24. We don't need a gateway because we're not going outside of our local network. Now, we also need to configure DNS settings. So for the commandlet for that is going to be set DNS client server, or client server address rather. We'll do interface index, that's interface index 4, and server addresses. I already know the IP address of the domain controller is 192.168.1.2. So now I should be able to ping foo.com and that should resolve. And it does, and we get our ping back. So now we're going to try this again. I'm going to press the up arrow a couple of times just because I'm a little lazy and already have the commandlet there. So, famous last words in IT, right? This should work. So let's see. We'll feed it the administrator credential. And now it's going to restart. And once this has restarted, then it will be joined to the domain. Now, back here in on the server, we can verify this. If I were to do, and I know the name of the computer is test PC, I should be able to do get AD computer identity test PC, and we now have a computer object. And you can tell that it's in the workstation's OU by looking at the distinguished name. And it will show that it's enabled, and the name that's going to be set in DNS will be the fully qualified domain name of testpc.foo.com. So in just a moment, this is going to reboot, and then we will test logging in with our domain user that we created and verify that everything works. So I'll pause the video for just a moment while this finishes rebooting. All right, so our test PC has rebooted. We're now here on the login screen, and here's the moment of truth. We're going to click Other User. We're signing in to the foo domain. So test user, we'll put in the password. And again, famous last words in IT, this should work. So far so good. We get that nice polite welcome. And let's see. Should take just a couple of moments or so. And there we are. We're going to go through the beginning of making a new profile on the local machine, but we have successfully authenticated using the test user account, which we created on our domain controller using PowerShell. So this may seem a bit cumbersome, especially if you're not used to using PowerShell, but you'll find that the more you do this, especially if you need to create like 50 users or such, you can use scripts and you can import a CSV file of stuff, and it makes life easier. The big thing to remember is that the server itself does not need to have a GUI to make this happen. You can do this all with PowerShell. Now, if you still want to have GUI consoles to work with, like the AD users and computers, or in particular group policy management, you can install those consoles on either your workstation or jump box that you would use to access a server anyway. And what that will do is allow you on probably a little, not necessarily more powerful machine, but if these are VMs, especially in your lab, you would have these GUI tools available to you, but it's not adding extra burden on the server by having to have the GUI and all these tools installed on that server. They simply don't need to be there. All the server needs to do is be a domain controller and just work with the directory itself. So here we are. We've logged into the desktop, Go into PowerShell real quick. You can see my evaluation has expired. Actually, I think I still have 85 days of my 90 days for Windows 10, but since this can't connect to the internet, it can't check the license. So in just a moment, this will boot up, and we're going to do the who am I command to confirm the user account that we're using. Give that just another moment or so. I will say Windows 10 does have a perceived faster boot time, but really that boot time is just getting you to where you can log in, and then there's still background processes and such running that makes this seem like, hey, we've logged in, but we're not quite ready to go. So if I do who am I, we see it says foo test user. So I've just proof positive that we have logged in using this domain user account that we made via PowerShell on the domain controller, which we configured to be a domain controller using PowerShell in the command line only environment for Windows Server. So I hope you found this useful. If you did, make sure you click like and subscribe to the channel, and I will see you the next time, and thank you for watching.